registered. So, good morning, everybody. Very warm welcome to this seminar on understanding vulnerability in the context of climate change. My name is Marc Campins. I'm leading the Monnet chair on EU environmental law, and well, I'm also organizing, all together with Professor Martin Vide, this seminar. Just give me a few minutes for those that already know us, that probably I just need to thank you very much for your constant support to the activities of our church that we have been organizing since 2017. For those who are participating for the first time in our activities, just allow me a half a minute to introduce our chair. The chair, the Monnet chair on European Union environmental law, was first awarded by the European Commission in 2017, and it has been renewed for the period 2020 to 2023. So we are just, well, of course, very glad because of that. Together with my colleagues on the chair, we are organizing a series of activities. Some cases are seminars, in other cases are publications, through which we actually intend to take part in the strengthening of the environmental law in our country and at European Union level, of course. And that from different perspectives, mostly from public law, but that could be international law, European law, administrative law, constitutional law, and all these different areas. And in this context is where, with Professor Martin Vide, and actually because of her initiative at the very beginning, when she just arrived to our University of Barcelona as an invited professor, as a postdoc invited professor for this year, that, well, we decided to organize this seminar that we both coordinate, and that will be later followed by a publication in a format of a book. So we will have a number of excellent speakers today, or the best of the best on these areas, who are going to offer us different perspectives from which to address issues related to vulnerability under the common denominator of climate change. And of course, probably the icing of cake on cake will be also the special session with Professor John Knox on the right to the environment. I just want to say that actually for us, vulnerability is also an important topic to address. In general, vulnerability from the perspective of the law is quite already common concept, in the sense that, of course, from the perspective of the protection of the weaker party in all its dimensions, economic, social, political, cultural, it's usually linked to the idea of equality or justice. And it has been, of course, a constant issue for legal scholars. But of course, nowadays, and in terms of environmental vulnerability or climate vulnerability, it's also an issue which is very much present also among the academia. I just wanted to mention a very interesting research project led by Professor Alenza and Professor Osoro at the Public University of Navarra, that it's just about that concept, and they have just recently published a book on that. So I think that the emergence of this concept of vulnerability in the general context of the climate emergency has been something that has been increasingly emphasized. So I just want to give the floor my colleague Professor Martin Vide, just before introducing our first speaker. Let me just first give you some technical recommendations just before giving the floor to Professor Ventur. As for this morning session, well, I will see that. But during the presentations of our speakers, we would be very grateful if you could keep your microphones off. So put that off, so it allows the platform to work better. If you have questions during the presentations, please use the chat and we will save those questions for the debate. In the debate, we will read out these questions and we'll give the floor also, of course, to all those who wish to speak directly. To do so, you only need to ask for the floor using the icon of a person at the bottom of your screen. You will give you the floor, then please remember to activate the microphone and the camera. On the other hand, I just want to mention that most of the session, not all of them, but most of the sessions or the presentations will be recorded, as will be the debate. So if you wish not to be recorded as audience or when you just make your contribution, please just don't activate the camera. That's all. When you have the floor to talk, I'm talking for the people on the audience, the public. For the speakers, those are the speakers who are accepted to be recorded will be recorded. Those who are not will not be recorded at all. And finally, just let me give you a final warning. If for any reason there is a problem with the network or the platform that we cannot solve immediately, it has never happened. We have a plan B on another platform, which is Teams. So you will immediately receive an email from the Monnet chair, from myself, so that we will send you another link to enter another session where we can continue our seminar. It has never happened. So just before introducing our first speakers, let me give the floor to my colleague, Rama Ventur.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mar, and welcome to everybody to this seminar on understanding vulnerability in the context of climate change, which is a topic, if you want to say, in vogue or in fashion in recent years, and this is due to several factors. First, the increase in problems related to environmental protection and climate change with a focus on the human rights crisis, and second, the increasing number of legal and political, especially institutional debates that refer repeatedly to the concept of vulnerability. And as I am currently working on a postdoc research project on the notion of vulnerability in collaboration with my colleague Mark Campins, we decided together to program a day journey on this notion in relation to climate change. And as you can see, we try to plan the program according to sessions with a focus on 3 essential issues, because the notion of vulnerability is really so large and we cannot imagine, we can imagine 2, 3, and 4 days debating the concept of vulnerability, but we tried here to focus the day of the seminar on 3 essential issues: the general dimensions, principles, and notion of vulnerability itself. Second dimension related to biodiversity and oceans. And the third dimensions rather focused on human rights, with a special session reserved to Jean Knox, the former special reporter for human rights and environment at the UN. So I would there like to thank Mark Campins for having accepted with great pleasure and with really scientific generosity to collaborate with me in the organization of this seminar. And I'm not going to delay any longer, because I know that speakers now will begin the first session, and I will now hand over the speakers for the first session. Thank you. Welcome to everybody, and I hope that we will have an interesting debate in this seminar. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rama. So let me just now introduce briefly our first 4 speakers. Of course, first speaker will be Professor Javier Martin Vide, Dr. Martin Vide. He's a professor of physical geography at the University of Barcelona. He is also a member of the Royal Academy of Science and Arts. He's former president of the Spanish Association of Climatology and the Association of Spanish Geographers. I worked with him quite a lot when he also was former director of the Institute for Water Research at the University of Barcelona. Of course, he's a very well-known expert in terms of climate change. He has been a reviewer of the 4th and the 5th IPCC reports. He has been giving a lot of conferences and lectures. He's a renowned conference in that sense, and of course he has also published a lot in all those issues. So thank you very much, Professor Martin Vide. And also I'm very glad to introduce all of you our second speaker. Professor Javier Martin Vide, excuse me, will give us a lecture or a presentation on the climate change trends and risk. Then we will have a second speaker, Professor Marta Torres-Schaub. She's a research director at the Seminari, specializing on environmental law and climate change. She's teaching environmental law at the University of Paris 1 and Sciences Po in Paris. She has been very much involved as a founder, as a developer of several networks on climate change issues, on environmental issues, and now she's a very active researcher, associate researcher at the Institute de Développement, Institut de Développement Durable et Relations Internationales, the IDRI. And of course, she has been also the leader of several research projects and is piloting several research programs. And she has also recently published a new interesting book on the droit et changement climatique, comment répondre à l'urgence climatique, regards croisés à l'interdisciplinaire. Donc, merci d'être aujourd'hui ici avec nous. Then Professor Torres-Schaub will introduce us on the understanding vulnerability in the context of the climate emergency, on the development and judicial approach. Professor Ángel Rodrigo, colleague from the Pompeu Fabra University, will give us a very theoretical, I guess, approach, as he's the expert on that. On the due diligence obligations as a tool to manage radical vulnerability derived from climate change. Professor Ángel Rodrigo, he's an associate professor of public international law at University Pompeu Fabra in Barcelona. He has been author of several very good, nice books on public international law, sometimes together with Professor Oriol Casanovas, other times on his own, and he has been one of he is actually in our area one of the most, as I said, the theoretical, deeper experts on public international law, legal issues, of course. Then our fourth and last speaker for this first morning session is Professor Teresa Fajardo. She's, of course, another colleague of, from the University of Granada. She's also a member of the Jean Monnet Chair, and she's also a very nice friend, a good friend. Professor Fajardo, she's an associate professor of public international law at the University of Granada. She has been leading researcher of different international projects. So right now she's taking part in one of those projects funded by the Norwegian Research Consortium on biodiversity conservation. But he has also been very involved in some European Union research projects. In particular, I will mention the project EFACE on the protection of the environment through the criminal law and the problems of enforcement of European environmental law. She also has been a part of the group who prepared a report on wildlife crime for the European Parliament. And of course, she's also an expert in all the different areas of European Union environmental law and international environmental law, areas in which, of course, she has also been publishing extensively. So she will present about the principles for addressing the vulnerability of biodiversity to climate change. So those are the presentations of our speaking. I just want to thank you very much to all of them. And now we will start with our first presentations, Professor Javier Martin Vide. Javier, you have the floor. Javier? Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Javier, okay, thank you very much.
Buenos días. Good morning to everybody. First of all, I would like to thank the directors of the seminar, Professors Marc Campins and Rama Bentirou, for the kind invitation. Well, I'm not a lawyer, but a climatologist. Therefore, my talk will have a contextual character. To begin, I'm going to remember the physical limits of the planet and the climate system. The Earth is only 40,000 kilometers in circumference. And on this planet, as you know, we live 7.5 billion humans, every day consuming a large amount of resources and every day generating an enormous volume of waste. Well, the climate system. As you know, the climate system is a complex system made up of 5 natural components: atmosphere, ocean, lithosphere, biosphere, and cryosphere. I like to add one more component, the 6th component, our socioeconomic system. Among the components, it's very important the ocean. The ocean plays a very prominent role because it has great thermal inertia. Even if atmospheric composition were fixed today, global mean temperature rise and sea level rise would continue due to oceanic thermal inertia. So we can invoke the precautionary principle that requires us to act. As you know, many institutions, the European Parliament, have declared the climate emergency, so we must act urgently, quickly. In the summary for policymakers of the 5th IPCC, you can read, warming of the climate system is unequivocal. The atmosphere and ocean have warmed. The amounts of snow and ice have diminished. Sea level have risen, and the concentrations of greenhouse gases have increased. In this slide, the next slide, in this slide, you can see the increasing evolution of the concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere. The CO2, greenhouse gas, a gas that warms, a gas that heats up, which comes from the combustion of fossil fuels. In the last month, in March, past March, it reached more than 470 ppm, parts per million. Recent climate trends. The average global air temperature has increased 0.85 degrees Celsius During a bit more than 1 century, the period 1880 to 2012, each of the last 3 decades has been warmer than any preceding decade since the mid of the 19th century. At present, we have 1.1, 1.2 degrees Celsius. So remember the Paris Agreement. We must not reach 2 degrees Celsius, and if possible, not 1.5 degrees Celsius. Well, we are close to this last figure. Other observed changes. The reduction of Arctic ice during the boreal summer is dramatic, as you can see on the left. On the right, the rise in sea level is also clear, 3-4 millimeters per year. It doesn't sound like much, but it has a negative effect on the coasts, where millions of people live. A very strong indicator of global warming is the retreat of glaciers, as exemplified by this glacier in Bolivian Andes, which disappeared in 2010. On the internet, you can find many images of glaciers from before and now, like this. They are so explicit that words are unnecessary. Regarding the cause of current climate change, the 5th IPCC says it's extremely likely that human influence has been the dominant cause of the observed warming since the mid-20th century, and this sentence has a confidence level of 95% or higher. In this slide, I have summarized the increase in confidence in the anthropic cause. Third IPCC, 2001, likely, 66%. Fourth IPCC, 2007, 90%, very likely. And 5 IPCC, 2013-14, extremely likely, 95%. Let's talk a little about hazards and risks. That is the subject also of this seminar. Well, anomalies and extreme weather events have nothing to do with climate change. We have always suffered long droughts, heavy rains, cold waves, hurricanes, and so on. But climate change will likely cause them to increase in frequency and to intensify. Here you have the risk triangle, which expresses risk as a comprehensive concept. The risk is a function of the hazard which come from nature, natural hazards, but also, very importantly, of the vulnerability of society and the exposure of the territory. The future climate. In this slide, the next slide, you have the temperature projections. The temperature increase between the end of the last century and the end of the current one will be between 1 and 3.7 degrees Celsius. It depends on the 6th component, we, humans. Warming will be more pronounced on the continent, as you can see in this slide, and in high boreal latitudes. You know, I'm sure, that the Arctic is the region the most affected by the global warming. Regarding the precipitation, on a warm planet, it rains more than on a cold planet because the water cycle is reinforced. More evaporation and more precipitation. This will happen in middle and high latitudes and at the equator, in blue and green colors in this slide. But the atmosphere dynamics will produce less rain in the subtropical and tropical zones, including the Mediterranean regions in brown yellow color. These are the projections for Europe of the European Environment Agency. On the left, the temperature. The whole of Europe will be warmer than now, especially the northern region. On the right, the precipitation. Europe will be divided into two parts, the center and the northern, with more precipitation, and the south, with less rain, the Mediterranean basin. For Spain, it's the same, a warmer country in the next decades, especially in summer, and a country drier than now. To finish, it should be noted that climate change brings us new risks. An example is the following. The cities present a phenomenon of local modification of the climate called the heat island, the urban heat island. City centers and downtowns are warmer than the periphery, the surroundings of the city at night. This was considered a curious, anecdotal phenomenon a few decades ago. Well, the heat island is today a public health risk because the heat island increases the high temperatures associated with global warming, reaching a critical value during heat waves. In this case, the morbidity and mortality of the elderly, the old people, and people with chronic diseases increase clearly. Here are the increased risk of mortality during the heat waves in Catalonia region increases by 20%. Another risk is the arrival of vectors that can transmit endemic tropical diseases like the tiger mosquito, which is already established in regions of the south of Europe. Finally, just remember the two key actions, mitigation and adaptation. Both are complementary strategies for reducing and managing the risk of climate change. And on a local scale, we need the greening to green cities, increasing the area of parks and gardens, the number of trees, the green roofs and fresh roofs, and substitute the strong, the hard ground with permeable soils and vegetated walls. And of course, good habits, sustainable mobility, and moderate consumption patterns. Thank you very much. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Professor Martin Vide. I'm just stopping sharing the presentation. Okay, thank you very much for this nice introductory presentation. Yeah, giving us the context and the projection, so you can just also show yourself in the situation of understanding how much important this concept of vulnerability will be, especially, I guess, in terms of adaptation, but of course also too in the sense of the mitigation, and in particular when we can see these slides that you show us on the, well, splitting the European countries in a half wet Europe and the dry Europe. So thank you very much, and thank you also for adjusting to the times. So let's just go to our second presentation, which is presentation from Marta Torres Chao. Just give me a moment. Okay.
Hi, good morning.